Well, hello, my YouTube friends. So I'm on vacation this week, and I didn't plan any trips or going out of town or anything. So I'm getting a lot more stuff done that I have been procrastinating. So anyway, what you see before you is an out-of-spec lower receiver from a local company called Full Spectrum Firearms. Now the shop that they were in closed up, and I don't know if they're based out of Madera, which isn't far. It's only about 25 miles from here. And so, if you'll remember, it was a few years ago, right around Christmas, down in San Bernardino, there was a shooting at some office Christmas party, and we won't get into the race of the people involved. But at that time, or after that happened, things are already strict in California, and so when that happened, everyone started rushing out and buying everything they could get their hands on. All the complete guns were gone. All that's left was lowers here and there, if you could find any. And so that shop, Full Spectrum, they had some lowers in there for sale, and I ended up buying 2 of them with consecutive serial numbers. And they sat for a while before I started putting them together. What I didn't know at the time is that this hole right here is out of spec, and the reason it's out of spec is the distance. Let me see if I can focus. Well, it's black, and this old iPad isn't doing that well with it. But anyway, so it's too far down. The distance from here to here is too great. Okay, and I didn't notice that at first. Okay, what you see right here is an ALG trigger kit, and I bought that from Midway, and I bought 2 of them. Now, I don't remember what hassle or what I had to go through to get them installed, but once installed, it did work. It functioned properly, and I fired the gun using that, or using this trigger right here. But then when I had to renew my carry permit, the guy that I usually go to, he's a retired Treasury agent. He wasn't doing it anymore, conducting the classes. So I got a hold of this other shop, this shooting range, indoor shooting range called the Firing Line. They're in Clovis, California. And, big shout out to these guys. So very professional and everything. And when I was there during that course, I was like very pleased with, with their professionalism. And so, I like to support people, and the best way to support people and to make friends with businesses is to spend money. Imagine that. The business likes it when you spend money. And so, I looked around in there, to see what they had that I needed, and they had this trigger hanging on the wall, and I forget how much it was, but so I said, yeah, let me buy that from you. And if it was it is a Gazelle G2S, I believe. Yeah, right here by my thumb. And so Gazelle 2-stage. And I already had a pair, or I still already have a pair of Gazelle SSA triggers. And so not really knowing the difference or anything, I just, okay, it got the Gazelle name, so let me have it. It seemed like it was cheaper than the other 2. So then after a while I went home, or, after a while I decided to install it. And it's supposed to be a drop-in trigger and all that. Man, what a hassle. I could not get that thing in. I couldn't get the trigger. And you can see like right in there, and that part underneath the selector. Like, oh man, I was just so frustrated and so angry. Now, I deleted the video that I made that time. And but it was horrible. Hold on a second. Okay. And so I called them up, at the firing line and asked them, if they were having any problems reported with the G2S, and they're like, no, we sell a few of them, they're all good, we use them. And so I told them what problems I was having, and they were like, okay, well, first of all, you're too stupid to install it yourself, so bring it down and we'll take a look at it. Okay. So, all right. And so I took it down there, just as is, as you can see it. And I think that was probably out at the time. It's been a while. But this fitting pin, was in. And I took all the parts, everything down there. And all right, so one guy took it in the back, wherever he does his gunsmithing. And he came back out and he said, well, you got two problems now. I'm like, okay, well, what are they? He goes, one, you're too stupid to install it yourself. Okay. Like, all right, which isn't too far from the truth, but these are pretty easy to assemble. And so the second problem was the lower receiver was out of spec, and he had, took him, a few minutes to figure it out, but he was able to determine that this was too far down and was interfering with that part of the trigger that you can see in there. And I've assembled lowers previously and never had a problem. And I don't remember what problem I had to go through to get the ALG trigger in, to get this kit. But however I did it, and he asked me, he's like, well, how'd you do it? How'd you get, I don't know, man. I don't know, because this piece, right, it has to slide in here. And it was just the interference, because the hole was too low, it was interfering with the trigger. You couldn't even get this piece to slide in. But somehow I did it previously, and it worked with the ALG trigger. And so he gave me an extra, where is it? He gave me an extra selector. Here's what's left of the Gazelle kit right here. We'll get to that in a minute. Here's that plastic bullet. You saw that before. And it's like, all right. And so when he gave me like all my parts, he's like, here's your detent and here's your spring. He goes, I don't know why it's all jacked up like that. And, at first I didn't know either. But later on, as I was thinking about it, I remembered that when I was putting this together, whatever problems I had getting the trigger in and the selector, I don't remember that specifically, but I do remember the detent. It was so tight, and you couldn't even turn it. I mean, that thing was in there. It just was like, you could not do it. And I had to end up putting this in a grinder and cutting it off, shortening it. Right? And so that made sense when I remembered that and I thought about it. Well, yeah, I had to shorten it because the hole's too low. All right, so fast forward to this week, and all my gun projects are back on the front burner, and so I figured it was time, since I'm on vacation, and it had been raining in California. It was raining, so I was doing a lot of indoor stuff. Although the sun's out bright today, you can see the curtain. So I decided to start working on this, correct this problem. So the first thing I had to do, okay, that's the old one, and I'm going to keep all these pieces together because they do work in this out of spec receiver, for whatever that's worth. Now you can see the trigger in there and it looks shiny. That's because the first thing I had to do, let me zoom in. Right, you can see it, the trigger's shiny. The first thing I had to do was file that down so that the selector can go in and out. Because, I mean, the only way to get the trigger in and with the out of spec hole here was to put this in first and then put the trigger under it and then fight it right here to, you know, a good thing I had this fitting pin. You know, I mean, what a nightmare that was. And so I don't want to go through that every time that I wanted to file and make an adjustment with this. So I took a set of, here's my some small files, and looking through the opening just like that, I kept filing and filing very carefully, right, and shortened that part of the trigger enough that the selector can go in and out. Okay, now, you know, I was that far, but it still wouldn't work because of the out of tolerance. So then what I had to do, once I got to the point where I could easily put this in and out, I started filing on this side. And, you know, to reduce that distance, right, and give the trigger more room to travel. And so I, you know, just in, out, in, out. Let me see here. So I should go in. And then with this way, so the safety works. The fire position works. And you'll notice this receiver, it doesn't have no markings, right? It should have safe, semi, full, you know, a pew with a line through it, and a pew pew, and then a pew pew pew, or a safe, semi, Jerry Mikulik, or, you know, it should have some, there's no markings. And I don't know if they were in a hurry cranking these things out, and that's partly why this is off center, why this is out of spec. Luckily, these two holes are in spec, or at least they're in spec enough for it to operate, because I haven't had any, you know, once the trigger's in place, I didn't even know this was out of spec until I went to put the Gazelle trigger in it. But the triggers, this is 2 triggers now that, you know, they do seem to work properly. And, okay, let me set this down. Hold on a second. Let me move my, I got the C clamp holding this. Okay, move that over there. If you want one of these hats, I'll leave a link to the, I'll leave a link to those. That was on my Twitter feed. A random tweet came across, and the guy had those. And okay, now one thing I didn't like about this, and one thing I don't like about this trigger assembly, is it has something that no other trigger I've ever used has, and that's these little tiny springs that go in place, and there's room for them. I mean, if you look at this one, even it has that. Let me zoom in. Right, you can see that shelf right there, and it has the groove. But always before, it just used the like the other springs, if I'm not mistaken, to like sit in that groove or something. It didn't come with these 2 little, or maybe 4. Let me zoom back out, and you can see right here. Okay, it starts right there, goes across those flats, and then wraps around, and that is this spring right here. Okay, and here's the pin. Where's the pin? There's the pin. Right, and so the instructions tell you to to put it on both of them, to put it here, even though that's not showing it, but it is showing it there. Detailed view of installed hammer pin retainer. Okay, no one else has that, but this one does. My SSA, they don't have that. This is the first one that ever had. I'm going to go ahead and use it. Okay, I have to edit this part in because what I just said was incorrect. I read the instructions, and the instructions do not tell us to add one of those little spring clips like you see right here to the trigger. The instructions only tell us to add one to the hammer. And I took a closer look in there because I had to be sure of what I was doing, and that what you see right there is only the trigger spring. Okay, there's not one of those extra clips in there. And I had to pull the hammer, and I took it out. Hit all this area with compressed air to get rid of the filings from working on the trigger. So, and I looked at the hammers. Okay, here's the ALG hammer, right? And it's got that, you can see right there by my thumbnail, or like right there, there's a hole with a little piece of bent metal in there, and that's a hole that was drilled. And that's a spring, a straight spring that goes through, and that apparently engages the center groove holding the hammer pin in place. Okay, that's the ALG trigger, and probably every other trigger I've ever used. Now here's the Gazelle G2S trigger, and it does not have that hole or that extra spring or that extra retaining method, right, that the ALG does. And the hammer itself is machined to accept one of these little clips, right, like that right there. The hammer itself is machined right there to accept that clip, but only on one side. Okay, the Gazelle G2S hammer requires one of these. And so apparently they knew that one of them would go flying off into eternity and that we would need the second one. So that must be why there's two of them. So I just wanted to correct that statement. And I haven't used this trigger yet. It's been a while. It's been about a year or more since I went through this whole process. The guys at the firing line, they said they use this trigger and it works well for them. So I'm going to finish putting this together, and I'll post a video sometime later of this gun at the range. Okay, now back to the previous video. So for the verse of the day, we're going to go to the book of John, chapter 14. Let me zoom in. We're going to start with 5. John 14, verse 5. Thomas saith unto him, Lord, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the way? Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. If ye had known me, ye should have known my Father also. And from henceforth ye know him, and have seen him. Philip saith unto him, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. Jesus saith unto him, Have I been so long a time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, Show us the Father? Believest thou not that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I speak unto you. I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the very work's sake. All right, my friends, you have a good day.